Jae-sung sat at his desk, eyes fixed on the glowing screen before him. As one of Earth's leading xenobiologists, he had been tasked with studying the Zorgans, a newly discovered alien species that had recently made contact with humanity. At first, the Zorgans seemed peaceful, even friendly. Their sleek silver ships had appeared in Earth's skies just a few months ago, broadcasting messages of goodwill and a desire for cooperation. World leaders had been cautiously optimistic, hoping that this could be the start of a new era of interstellar diplomacy. But as Jae-sung pored over the latest data from the contact team, a frown creased his forehead. Something wasn't right. The Zorgans' behavior had started to shift, their requests becoming more demanding, their tone more aggressive. It was subtle, but to Jae-sung's trained eye, it was unmistakable. A knock at the door startled him from his thoughts. "Come in," he called, minimizing the sensitive files on his computer. The door opened to reveal Min Seo, a young diplomat who had been working closely with the Zorgans. "Dr. Jae-sung," she greeted him, her voice tight with concern. "I think we have a problem." Jae-sung gestured for her to take a seat. "I was just thinking the same thing. The Zorgans' behavior has changed, haven't you noticed?" Min Seo nodded, sinking into the chair opposite his desk. "They're becoming more insistent, almost aggressive. Just yesterday, they demanded access to our satellite network, claiming it was necessary for improved communication. When we refused, they became quite hostile." Jae-sung leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. "It doesn't make sense. Why the sudden change? What are they after?" "I don't know," Min Seo admitted, "but I don't like it. We need to be careful, Dr. Jae-sung. We don't know what they're capable of." Jae-sung couldn't agree more. He had dedicated his life to the study of alien life, but he had always known that first contact could be dangerous. Not every species out there would be friendly, and it was starting to look like the Zorgans might fall into that category. Over the next few weeks, Jae-sung and Min Seo worked tirelessly to unravel the Zorgans' motives. They analyzed every scrap of data, every communication, looking for clues. But the aliens were clever, their intentions carefully hidden behind a veil of diplomacy and doublespeak. Then, just when Jae-sung was starting to feel like they were at a dead end, the Zorgans made a surprising move. They invited a delegation of humans to a grand feast aboard their mothership, a gesture of friendship and goodwill. World leaders were divided. Some saw it as a trap, a ploy to lure them into a false sense of security. Others believed it was a genuine attempt at diplomacy, a chance to build bridges and foster understanding between their two species. In the end, it was decided that a small group would attend the feast, with Jae-sung and Min Seo among them. As leading experts on the Zorgans, their presence was deemed essential. As they boarded the alien craft, Jae-sung couldn't shake the feeling of unease that settled in his stomach. The Zorgans greeted them warmly, their alien faces split into what he assumed were meant to be friendly smiles. But there was something in their eyes, a glint of something cold and calculating, that sent a shiver down his spine. The feast was an extravagant affair, with dishes from across the galaxy laid out in a dazzling array. The Zorgans encouraged their human guests to eat, to sample everything, their tone almost aggressive in its insistence. As Jae-sung took a tentative bite of a strange purple fruit, he caught Min Seo's eye across the table. She looked as uneasy as he felt, her gaze darting around the room, taking in the Zorgans who seemed to be watching their every move. Something was wrong. Jae-sung could feel it in his bones, but what, exactly, the Zorgans were plotting remained to be seen. All he knew was that they needed to be on their guard, because in the vast reaches of space, trust could be a very dangerous thing indeed. To be continued in Part 2. The human delegation, led by Jae-sung and Min Seo, was escorted into a grand hall within the Zorgan mothership. The room was vast, with high arched ceilings and walls that seemed to shimmer with an otherworldly light. In the center of the hall was a long table, laden with a feast unlike anything the humans had ever seen. Dishes of every color and shape filled the table. some steaming, others chilled, each one more exotic than the last. Strange fruits glistened in bowls, their skins ranging from deep purple to brilliant blue. Platters of what looked like meat, but in hues of green and orange, were piled high. Even the drinks were foreign, with bubbling liquids that changed color as they were poured. The Zorgans, their tall, lithe forms draped in shimmering robes, gestured for the humans to take their seats. Jae-sung found himself seated next to the Zorgan leader, a being known as Zorax. Min-seo was further down the table, surrounded by other high-ranking Zorgans. As the feast began, Jae-sung couldn't help but notice that their hosts weren't eating. They encouraged the humans to try every dish, their long, slender fingers pointing out specific delicacies, but they did not partake themselves. When Jae-sung inquired about this, Zorax merely smiled, his thin lips stretching over sharp, glinting teeth. "Our biology is quite different from yours," he explained, his voice a sibilant hiss. "These dishes, while delectable to your kind, do not provide the sustenance we require. Please, eat, enjoy. This feast is for you." Despite his unease, Jae-sung found himself sampling the alien fare. Each bite was a revelation, flavors exploding on his tongue like nothing he had ever experienced. Some were sweet, others savory, some spicy beyond belief. It was as if every dish had been crafted to tantalize and delight human taste buds. As the meal progressed, Jae-sung began to relax. The food was delicious, and the Zorgans were being such attentive hosts. Perhaps his earlier suspicions had been unfounded. Maybe this was simply their way of building trust, of forging a connection between their species. But then he noticed something strange. Some of the human delegates, those who had been most enthusiastic in their consumption, were starting to look unwell. Their faces were flushed, their eyes glassy. Some were even swaying in their seats, as if having trouble staying upright. Alarmed, Jae-sung turned to Zorax to voice his concerns, but the Zorgan leader merely waved a dismissive hand. "A common reaction to new foods," he assured. "They will adjust. Please, continue enjoying yourselves." But Jae-sung couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. He caught Min-seo's eye across the table and saw his own worries reflected in her gaze. They needed to get their people out of here, and fast. Just as he was about to stand, to demand that they be allowed to leave, Zorax leaned in close. His breath was hot and alien against Jae-sung's ear, his words a venomous whisper. "You were right to suspect us, human. But it's too late now. The poison is already in your veins. By the time you return to your planet, you will all be dead, and Earth will be ours for the taking." Horror and rage surged through Jae-sung, but before he could act, the Zorgans were on their feet, weapons drawn. They hustled the humans out of the hall, back to their ship, their mocking laughter echoing in the corridors. As they were shoved into their vessel, the airlock sealing behind them with a hiss of finality, Jae-sung knew they had only one choice. They had to get back to Earth, had to warn their people about the Zorgans' treachery, and they had to pray that somehow, against all odds, they would survive the journey. The second part of the story introduces the grand feast aboard the Zorgan mothership, where the alien hosts encourage the human delegates to indulge in exotic dishes while refraining from eating themselves. As the meal progresses, some of the humans start to show signs of illness, raising Jae-sung's suspicions. The Zorgan leader, Zorax, dismisses Jae-sung's concerns, but then reveals the sinister truth. The food was poisoned, and the Zorgans expect the humans to die before they can warn Earth of the impending invasion. The humans are forcibly returned to their ship, left to face the dire consequences of the Zorgans' treachery. This section builds tension and reveals the central conflict of the story. It ends on a cliffhanger, with the humans racing against time to survive and warn their planet, setting the stage for the next part of the tale. The human delegation's ship hurtled through space, each member grappling with the horrifying revelation of the Zorgans' true intentions. Jae-sung, his mind reeling from Zorax's venomous words, knew they had precious little time to act. As the ship's medic tended to those who had fallen ill at the feast, Jae Sung and Min Seo convened an emergency meeting with the other delegates. They needed a plan, and they needed it fast. "We have to warn Earth," Min Seo said, her voice trembling but determined. "If the Zorgon's poison doesn't kill us first, they'll be coming for our planet next." Jae Sung nodded grimly. "We need to get a message out, let our people know what's coming. But we also need to find a way to survive this. If we don't make it back, our warning will be for nothing." For hours, they pored over the ship's medical supplies and research databases, searching for anything that could counteract the alien toxin coursing through their veins. But with each passing moment, more of the crew succumbed to the poison's effects, their condition worsening by the minute. Just as despair threatened to overwhelm them, Jae Sung stumbled upon a glimmer of hope. Deep in the ship's archives, he found records of a similar incident decades ago, when early human explorers had encountered a hostile alien species. The explorers had been poisoned, but a few had managed to survive using an experimental treatment. It was a long shot, but it was all they had. Jae Sung and the medic set to work synthesizing the treatment, praying that it would work against the Zorgon's venom. As they labored, Min Seo fought to establish a secure communication link with Earth. The Zorgons had sabotaged their primary systems, but she refused to give up. With skill and determination, she managed to send a coded message, warning of the impending danger. Back on Earth, chaos erupted as the message was received and decrypted. World leaders scrambled to prepare for an alien invasion, while scientists and military strategists worked around the clock to devise a defense plan. But amidst the panic and the planning, a cruel reality set in. The human delegation, Earth's first and last line of defense against the Zorgons, might already be dead. The fate of the planet hung in the balance, and all anyone could do was wait and hope. On the ship, Jae Sung and the medic administered the experimental treatment to the poisoned crew members. It was a tense and terrifying process, each injection a gamble with life and death. Hours turned into days as they monitored their patients, watching for any sign of improvement. And then, miraculously, the tide began to turn. One by one, the poisoned delegates started to recover, their vital signs stabilizing, their strength returning. Jae Sung nearly wept with relief when Min Seo opened her eyes, her gaze clear and focused for the first time since the fateful feast. They had done it. They had survived. But even as they celebrated this small victory, they knew that the real battle was yet to come. The Zorgons were still out there, still planning their invasion. And Earth, despite their best efforts, was still vulnerable. As their ship raced towards home, Jae Sung and Min Seo knew that their fight was far from over. They had survived the Zorgon's poison, but the war for Earth's future had only just begun. To be continued in Part 4. The third part of the story focuses on the human delegates' desperate struggle to survive and warn Earth about the Zorgon's impending invasion. After the shocking revelation that they have been poisoned, Jae Sung and Min Seo lead the effort to find a cure while simultaneously trying to send a warning message to Earth. The story introduces a glimmer of hope in the form of an experimental treatment that Jae Sung discovers in the ship's archives. As they race against time to synthesize the cure and administer it to the poisoned crew members, Min Seo manages to send a coded warning to Earth, alerting them to the Zorgon's sinister plot. Meanwhile, on Earth, the news of the impending invasion causes chaos and panic as world leaders and scientists scramble to prepare a defense plan. The fate of the planet hangs in the balance as they anxiously await further news from the human delegation. The part ends with a small victory as the experimental treatment proves effective, and the poisoned delegates begin to recover. However, Jae Sung and Min Seo know that their fight is far from over, as the Zorgons are still planning their invasion, and Earth remains vulnerable. This sets the stage for the next part of the story, where the humans will have to find a way to defend their planet against the alien threat. As the human delegation's ship approached Earth, a sense of trepidation filled the air. Jae Sung, Min Seo, and the rest of the crew knew that their miraculous survival was only the beginning of a much larger battle. The Zorgans, with their advanced technology and sinister intentions, posed a grave threat to humanity's very existence. Upon landing, the delegates were immediately whisked away to a secure government facility. There, they underwent extensive medical examinations and debriefings, as scientists and military officials sought to understand the nature of the Zorgans' poison and the extent of their plans for invasion. Meanwhile, Earth's defenses were being fortified at a breakneck pace. Military forces were mobilized, weapons systems were primed, and emergency response plans were put into action. The world held its breath, waiting for the first signs of the impending attack. Days turned into weeks, and a tense calm settled over the planet. The Zorgan ships, which had once filled the skies with their menacing presence, had vanished, leaving an eerie silence in their wake. Some began to wonder if the threat had passed, if perhaps the Zorgans had reconsidered their hostile intentions. But Jae-sung and Min-seo knew better. They had seen the malice in Zorax's eyes, heard the venom in his voice. The Zorgans were not a species to abandon their plans so easily. They were out there somewhere, biding their time. As the world waited, Jae-sung threw himself into his work. He studied the Zorgan poison in minute detail, searching for any weakness, any clue that could give Earth an advantage in the coming fight. He collaborated with scientists from around the globe, sharing his findings and learning from their expertise. Min-seo, too, was hard at work. She liaised with world leaders and military strategists, helping to coordinate Earth's defense efforts. She pored over every scrap of intelligence, every whisper of Zorgan activity, seeking to anticipate their next move. Despite their best efforts, however, the waiting began to take its toll. The constant state of high alert, the endless preparations, the gnawing fear of what was to come, it all weighed heavily on the people of Earth. Tempers frayed, nerves were stretched to the breaking point, and a sense of despair began to creep in at the edges. And still, the Zorgans did not come. It was during this time of waiting that Jae-sung made a startling discovery. As he examined the blood samples of the delegates who had been poisoned, he realized that something was different. The toxin, which had once coursed through their veins like a death sentence, was gone. Their bodies had somehow adapted, had found a way to neutralize the Zorgan venom. It was a revelation that sent shockwaves through the scientific community. If humans could adapt to the Zorgan poison, could they also find a way to resist their advanced weaponry? Could this be the key to Earth's salvation? Energized by this new hope, Jae-sung and Min-seo redoubled their efforts. They worked tirelessly, driven by the knowledge that every second brought them closer to the inevitable confrontation with the Zorgans. And then, just as suddenly as they had disappeared, the Zorgan ships returned. They filled the skies like a swarm of angry locusts, their weapons primed and ready for destruction. The time for waiting was over. The battle for Earth had begun. To be continued in Part 5. As the Zorgan ships darkened the skies, a grim realization settled over humanity. The anticipated invasion had finally begun. Earth's defenses, meticulously prepared during the tense waiting period, sprang into action. Fighter jets screamed across the horizon, missiles streaked towards the alien vessels, and ground forces braced for the imminent onslaught. However, amidst the chaos and fear, Min-seo's analytical mind seized upon a daring strategy, one that could potentially turn the tide of the conflict. Drawing from Jae-sung's groundbreaking discovery of humanity's resistance to the Zorgan poison, she proposed a bold plan: to use Earth's unique biological and chemical composition as a weapon against their would-be conquerors. Min-seo reasoned that if the Zorgan's physiology was susceptible to seemingly harmless Earth substances, then perhaps a targeted exposure could weaken or even incapacitate the alien forces. It was a risky gambit, but with the fate of the planet hanging in the balance, every option had to be considered. Wasting no time, Min-seo and Jae-sung convened an emergency meeting with Earth's top scientists, military strategists, and world leaders. They presented their audacious plan, outlining the potential risks and rewards. Some voiced skepticism, arguing that the Zorgans' technology was too advanced, their understanding of biology too sophisticated, for such a ploy to succeed. Others, however, saw a glimmer of hope in the proposal, a chance to seize the initiative and strike a decisive blow against their alien adversaries. After much deliberation, a consensus was reached. Earth would proceed with Min Seo's plan, even as its conventional defenses continued to battle the Zorgan onslaught. Scientists and military researchers immediately set to work, analyzing data from the return delegation to identify the most promising substances for their unconventional counterattack. Jae-sung, with his intimate knowledge of the Zorgan poison and its effects on human physiology, played a crucial role in this effort. He worked tirelessly, guiding teams of researchers as they sought to isolate and synthesize the compounds that could prove most effective against the alien invaders. As the Zorgan ships continued their relentless assault, pounding Earth's cities and sowing devastation across the globe, the planet's defenders labored with grim determination. In hidden laboratories and fortified bunkers, they toiled to create their biological and chemical arsenal, knowing that time was running out. Finally, after days of intense effort and countless setbacks, they had their weapon, a potent cocktail of Earth's most noxious and irritating substances, tailored specifically to exploit the Zorgans' physiological weaknesses. It was a long shot, but it was also humanity's best hope. With the alien ships closing in on Earth's major population centers, Min Seo and Jae-sung knew that they had to act fast. They proposed a daring mission. A small elite team would infiltrate the Zorgan mothership, armed with their newly developed weapon, and attempt to deliver it directly into the invaders' life support systems. It was a suicide mission, and everyone knew it. But as Min Seo and Jae-sung looked around the room, they saw only determination and resolve in the faces of their colleagues. These were individuals who had already risked everything to buy Earth precious time, and they were ready to do so again. As the team prepared for their final desperate gambit, Earth held its breath. The fate of the planet, of all humanity, rested on the shoulders of a handful of brave souls, armed with nothing more than their courage, their ingenuity, and a weapon born of Earth's own unique essence. The stage was set for a confrontation that would determine the future of two worlds, a battle in which the very biology of Earth itself could prove to be the deciding factor. To be continued in Part 6. With their audacious plan in motion, Earth's defenders prepared for the critical mission that could determine the fate of their world. Min Seo and Jae-sung, the architects of this bold strategy, knew that success hinged on luring the Zorgans into a false sense of security. To that end, they proposed a daring gambit, hosting a second diplomatic feast, this time on Earth's own soil. The invitation was extended, a carefully crafted message that played upon the Zorgans' arrogance and their belief in humanity's impending doom. To the surprise of many, the alien leaders accepted, perhaps eager to gloat over their presumed victory or to witness firsthand the final moments of a conquered civilization. As the Zorgan delegation arrived, they were greeted with all the pomp and ceremony befitting a state visit. But beneath the surface, Earth's forces were mobilizing, preparing to spring their trap. The feast, held in a secure location and attended by a hand-picked group of human representatives, was the centerpiece of the operation. The table was laden with dishes from across the globe, each one carefully selected for its unique chemical composition. Spices, herbs, and ingredients that were harmless to humans, but potentially devastating to Zorgan physiology, were subtly incorporated into every course. The human attendees, aware of the plan, steeled themselves to play their parts, engaging the Zorgans in diplomatic small talk while encouraging them to partake of the feast. As the meal progressed, the Zorgans began to show signs of discomfort. Their arrogant demeanor gave way to confusion, and then to panic as the specially crafted dishes took their toll. Some clutched at their throats, gasping for air, while others doubled over in agony, their alien biology reacting violently to the unfamiliar substances. Seizing the moment, Earth's forces sprang into action. The elite team, led by Jae-sung and Min-seo, burst into the dining hall, armed with the concentrated biological weapon they had developed. In the ensuing chaos, they managed to subdue the weakened Zorgan leaders and secure the location. Simultaneously, other units launched a coordinated assault on the Zorgan ships orbiting Earth. Armed with the knowledge of the aliens' vulnerability, they targeted the invaders' life support systems, introducing the same noxious compounds that had proved so effective at the feast. The results were swift and devastating. Aboard the mothership, Zorgan crew members began to succumb to the effects of the toxins, their advanced technology powerless against the insidious attack. Confusion and disarray spread through their ranks as they struggled to comprehend the sudden turn of events. Back on Earth, Min-seo and Jae-sung confronted the incapacitated Zorgan leaders, their expressions a mix of triumph and grim determination. They offered the aliens a choice: surrender and depart Earth immediately, or face the full consequences of their failed invasion. Faced with the collapse of their fleet and the decimation of their forces, the Zorgans had little choice but to comply. In a bitter irony, the would-be conquerors found themselves at the mercy of the very species they had sought to destroy. As the Zorgan ships limped away from Earth's orbit, humanity celebrated a hard-won victory. The planet had been saved, not by superior technology or firepower, but by the ingenuity and tenacity of its defenders. Min-seo and Jae-sung, the unlikely heroes of the hour, watched the retreating alien vessels with a sense of profound relief, knowing that Earth had prevailed against seemingly impossible odds. The second feast, a desperate gamble born of necessity, had proved to be the turning point in the conflict. Earth had demonstrated that even in the face of an advanced alien threat, the resourcefulness and adaptability of the human spirit could triumph. The Zorgans, for all their technological might, had been undone by the very biology they had sought to exploit. As the world began to rebuild in the aftermath of the invasion, Min-seo and Jae-sung knew that the struggle was far from over. Earth had won a respite, but the galaxy was vast, and other challenges lay ahead. For now, however, they could take solace in the knowledge that when faced with the greatest threat in human history, they had risen to the occasion and emerged victorious. To be continued in Part 7.